Again, it is Sunday, November 7th, 2021. I just did a long spiel about Sue Montgomery's involvement in Unitarian Universalist cover-up and denial of what the Unitarian Universalist Association's Canadian attorney described as such despicable crimes as pedophilia and rape. Sue Montgomery has directly involved herself on several occasions in shutting down this protest. She's essentially been involved in about at least 3 years, up to 4 years of suppression of this protest. And she also kept me out of city council meetings for at least a couple of years by falsely accusing me of criminal harassment. The previous clip, I think, ended because it only records for half an hour and it ended at some point. A couple of young women came along and they were videoing and taking photos. So we had a little chat with them. I don't know how much of that got recorded, if any. So we're just starting up again. I suppose I should maybe repeat some of what I did say because I don't know when the camera stopped recording. So we'll come back to when Sue Montgomery, when she was the justice reporter for the Gazette, and after she'd started the Bean Rape Never Reported hashtag campaign, persuaded Montreal media lawyer Mark Banty, and most likely persuaded top-level Gazette executives such as the editor-in-chief Lucinda Chawdon and probably other Gazette executives, maybe the managing editor and so on and so forth, essentially persuaded at least, at minimum, Mark Banty, probably with the knowledge and permission of Lucinda Chawdon and other Gazette executives, but perhaps not. You know, maybe Mark Banty just did her a little personal favor. But in any case, he had me served with a cease and desist demand letter that falsely accused me of libeling Sue Montgomery. He listed a bunch of statements that I made about Sue Montgomery, all of which were very truthful and supported by evidence, and pretended that they were libelous statements when they were no such thing. I don't mind saying that I humiliated Mark Banty in my response to that letter. Because he was full of shit. And he's still full of shit if he still thinks I'm libeling Sue Montgomery. I don't have much respect for lawyers who aid and abet the cover-up and denial of pedophilia and rape, and that includes Mark Banty of the Gazette. Mark Banty, and you can sue me for libel, Mark, if you want to. Be my fucking guest, asshole. Excuse me. So anyhow, as I said, I have very, very little respect for lawyers, corrupt, unethical, dishonest, scummy little lawyers who try to intimidate me into shutting up about pedophilia and rape in the Unitarian Universalist Church by falsely accusing me of libel, not to mention blasphemous libel. Oh, that goes to you too, Major Marc-Andre Coulombe. You're an asshole too, as you might have noticed from my responses to some of your demand letters. Getting back to things, I very generously gave Mark Banty and Sue Montgomery an opportunity to formally withdraw their false accusation of libel, and I made it clear that I would completely forgive Sue Montgomery for falsely accusing me of libel if she formally withdrew the libel accusations by midnight of Christmas. I was served on the 4th of December, so I gave Sue Montgomery the better part of the month to think about things and to come around to withdrawing the false accusation. Certainly 20 days, 21 days, 3 weeks, shall we say. Plenty of time to think about it, withdraw the accusations and apologize and be forgiven. But she didn't. So, as far as I'm concerned, she's not forgiven. As a result of that, I protested outside the Gazette. I think I even protested outside the Gazette, before Christmas in December, just to make it, the point clear. And then I protested again in January after the New Year. I came back and I protested outside the Gazette. And I'd say January up to about mid-January. I think my last protest was the 14th or 15th of January. And then a month later, I find out that Sue Montgomery has left the Gazette. She'd been offered a buyout from Post Media that she did not refuse. I suspect that Sue Montgomery was made an offer she could not refuse. I suspect that she was told that if she didn't accept the offer, she'd be fired for ethical breaches, because she had previously been found guilty of an ethical breach, and she'd been warned that if there was a second ethical breach, that she'd be fired. So I believe that this is a disguised firing of Sue Montgomery, basically offering her a buyout, but making it, probably they said, look Sue, if you don't accept this buyout, we're going to have to fire you. Take it or leave it. I suspect that's what happened. So, getting back to things, just going to make sure this camera's still running. Yes, it is, and we're actually seeing a fellow who I believe was involved in previous false criminal charges against me. His car pulled up, and the gentleman looks a lot like a guy who was involved with falsely accusing me of violating section 176.3 of the Canadian Criminal Code. Might not be him, but very similar. So yes, getting back to December of 2000, it may not be him, but it looks a lot like him. And anyway, getting back to December of 2000, I was here protesting. It was, I believe, December 4th or 6th, something like that. Anyway, the first Sunday in December 2000, I was protesting when a SPVM police car pulled up. An officer got out and told me he was here to arrest me. No ifs, ands, or buts. Like, he was there to arrest me. There was no discussion or anything. It's like he had been ordered to arrest me. I said, what for? He said, public nuisance. So apparently I was being arrested for public nuisance for protesting against Unitarian Universalist clergy abuse that includes pedophilia and rape. So he was pretty good about it. He essentially held me in the police car while he processed the paperwork, and I think he gave me some paperwork in terms of appearing in court, and then he let me go on my way. He released me with no conditions or anything. So he was generally pretty good about it. The only thing I would quibble about is that because when I was about to be released, he said, don't come back. And I asked him, what do you mean, don't come back? Do you mean like, don't come back today, next week? Or do you mean, don't come back at all? And he essentially said, don't come back at all. That was like, it's permanent. When in fact it wasn't. I spoke to some lawyers soon afterwards, and they made it very, very, I think it maybe is the guy who falsely accused me of a crime back in 2000. Yes, I think it is. Child sex abuse cover-up enabler, sir. That's what you are, because part of what I'm protesting about is child sex abuse committed by Unitarian Universalist ministers, Unitarian Universalist Sunday school teachers, and Unitarian Universalist lay leaders. Congratulations, sir. Yes, I'm quite sure now that that is the man, whose name I forget, who was involved in falsely accusing me of violating section 176.3 of the Canadian Criminal Code, which prohibits the disruption of religious services. That's what it's about. It's it was, and I believe still is, a section of the Canadian Criminal Code that makes it a crime to disrupt a religious service or other meeting for a moral purpose, if I remember the wording correctly. And this man, and Val Plante, Val Plante, that's a Freudian slip. Val Bourdon, also known as Valmir Bourdon, and Jeremy Searle, Montreal City Councillor. Jeremy Searle, yes, how can I forget Jeremy Searle? These three men were the front people for the Unitarian Church of Montreal in terms of falsely accusing me of disrupting church services. This is something worth talking about, because this was the first criminal charge against me by Montreal Unitarians, and Sue Montgomery had a certain role in keeping that out of the news, because after I was arrested in early December, again, the first Sunday of December 2000, more than 20 years ago, I called up the Gazette because I wanted the Gazette to report that I'd been arrested for protesting against clergy abuse outside the Unitarian Church of Montreal. The whole idea was to, try to convict me of a crime for protesting, and presumably they wanted to shut down my protest. I don't know why court conditions weren't imposed at that point. They weren't. So there were zero conditions on me. I just warned by the cop not to come back. So I called the Gazette. I got the city desk. A woman answered. So I told the woman, that I'd been arrested for alleged public nuisance for protesting against clergy abuse outside the Unitarian Church of Montreal, and would the Gazette please report this to the public? This woman repeatedly insisted that this was not newsworthy. She said, it's not newsworthy, it's not newsworthy, it's not newsworthy, at least 3 times. She even got backup from another Gazette employee, a columnist who may have had some pull too. I'm trying to remember his name. His pseudonym was Doug Camely, but his real name, right now I know it, but I just can't pull it out of the memory banks right now. So Sue Montgomery in December of 2000 essentially ran interference in terms of having a legitimate newsworthy story reported in the Gazette. So this was her first running interference, preventing a newsworthy story from being reported in the Gazette. But I didn't know at the time that she was a member of the Unitarian Church of Montreal. I only found that out recently, like in the last 2 or 3 years, as a result of testimony in court arising out of the false accusation of criminal harassment she brought against me. So that's it. It's like Unitarians have accused me of crimes at least, off the top of my head, minimum 5 times. And on 2 of those occasions, there were trials involved. There was a trial in terms of the violating section 176.3. I was acquitted after it became very obvious that my protest outside the Unitarian Church of Montreal does not in any way disrupt the services that go on inside the Unitarian Church of Montreal. I've already explained that in the past. I'm not going to repeat it right now. I just want to see if this camera's still running, because it may be getting overheated or something. Yeah, we're still okay, still running, and I don't see the overheating thing. So we've got about 4 minutes left in this segment of video. So that's it. Sue Montgomery, coming back to Sue Montgomery. That was her earliest involvement in keeping Unitarian Universalist clergy abuse, sexual or otherwise, out of the news by refusing to assign a reporter at the Gazette to report on the fact that I'd been arrested for violating section 176.3 of the Canadian Criminal Code. And the Gazette, to the best of my knowledge, never reported any aspect of that. I kept asking the Gazette to report that story, and they never did, to the best of my knowledge, or if they did, it was at the most minimal level. There was at one point a photo of my protest outside the Gazette, I believe in the religion section of the Gazette, that Harvey Shepherd, who's also a member of the Unitarian Church of Montreal, he was the religious columnist for the Gazette. They don't have one anymore. Maybe they should. Maybe they should have a bit more, how can I put it, God talk in the Gazette, shall we say. Maybe it's long past due that they brought back a religion columnist. Might bring a little bit of the morality back, because there sure as hell isn't much morality in the Gazette these days. They're incredibly unethical, incredibly dishonest. They report my story in a way that can be reasonably described as fake news. Alison Haynes wrote a column after I was arrested for criminal harassment. I think even after I was acquitted for criminal harassment, she wrote a column, I think arising out of my acquittal, about how what a terrible person I am, what a nightmare I am for protesting outside the Unitarian Church of Montreal. You know what? I don't think she even mentioned that I was protesting. She just basically said I was harassing, Sue Montgomery and the minister Diane Rollert. She completely left out what the protest was about, which was about the cover-up and denial of sexual abuse by Unitarian Universalist ministers. That's not the whole protest, but that's a major, significant portion of it. It has been all along, and certainly since 2012, so the better part of a decade, I've had an added emphasis on that, thanks to the Unitarian Universalist Association falsely accusing me of blasphemous libel and legal bullying that was meant to conceal pedophilia and rape from the public. So Allison Haynes' column, essentially it's fake news is what it comes down to. It's certainly highly misleading. It conceals the truth. It certainly conceals the fact that I'm protesting against clergy abuse, that includes pedophilia and rape. It makes no mention whatsoever of that aspect of the protest. Just tries to make me out to be an harasser of Sue Montgomery and Diane Rollert and so on. So getting back to Diane Rollert, I think I already spoke about this in previous clips. So in 2007, Diane Rollert sought a restraining order against me. She was the new minister at the Unitarian Church of Montreal, and in a very, very short time after being installed as the new minister at the Unitarian Church of Montreal, she sought a restraining order against me to try and shut down this protest. She claimed to fear for her safety. She got a bunch of Montreal Unitarians to sign affidavits saying the same thing, including Sue Montgomery. Sue Montgomery was one of the people who signed an affidavit claiming to fear for her safety. Even though I'd been protesting for almost a decade at that point, and I never threatened anyone. My protest was very peaceful. There was no real reason for anyone to fear for their safety. On the other hand, I'd been assaulted by Unitarians a few times. I'd been threatened